we create misery when we are in disagreement with reality. When we start controlling, we feel insecurity. My biggest enemy is another woman because I am totally dependent on a man. Just to share some points with you guys, let's have a deeper look at understanding attachments. So number one, they're emotional bonds. They can be emotional bonds. So attachments can create a sense of belonging and connection, which are important for mental well-being. However, these bonds can sometimes turn into dependencies. For example, you could be in a very toxic marriage. It's one of the key areas that I have taught in the past. People who are in toxic marriages and relationships, but they are unable to leave because they feel this is my source of strength. For women, especially, they're so dependent on men in our culture that they feel this is my source of strength. And I ask them this question all the time: who is your Rabb? Is your Rabb Allah, or is your Rabb your husband? Because if your Rabb is Allah, then a divorce doesn't matter because Allah never divorces you. However, if your Rabb is your husband, then yeah, he's your source of strength and joy, then you are going to be in misery. And same thing for men who are in toxic marriages and they think that they have to do it for the sake of their children. And their source of strength could be the identity that they have created in the marriage as the good provider, as the father, as the caretaker, and all of those things. But the reality is really the future of your children, their health, their well-being is not in your hands, not in the mother's hands. It's in the hands of Allah. So really understanding that some bonds, some emotional bonds that are abusive, that are holding us back, we still hold on to them because we have made them a source of strength and joy for us. And therefore, anything that we place above Allah is going to bring us misery. So it creates an attachment. Number two, expectation and control. Attachments often come with expectations about how others should behave or how situations should unfold. The desire for control can lead to frustration when reality doesn't match our expectations. So one of my favorite quotes from Byron Katie, one of my favorite teachers, is that we create misery when we are in disagreement with reality. For what does that mean? For example, oh, my husband cheated on me and that should not have happened. And because it happened, now I'm miserable and I'm in pain. Well, it should have happened because it has happened. There is no use fighting the reality. If you keep saying it should not have happened, I didn't deserve this, it shouldn't have happened. Whether you deserve it or not, it has happened. There is no use denying it. So the longer we stay attached to that concept, the more misery we're going to create in our lives. And the expectation that we sometimes, I was counseling this, I have a student who is a beautiful young woman, and she's so worried about getting hurt in a marriage, and she hasn't even met her husband yet. So the marriage is somewhere in the future, but she's so worried about her husband cheating on her that she's trying to create all these control mechanisms that, how can I determine that, I find a guy who is not even going to look at another woman and is never going to find another woman attractive. And I told her this is a very unrealistic expectation. That's not going to happen. But what you can, and you can't control what another person is going to do in the future. You might meet someone who is totally into you and loves you and thinks the world of you and stays with you and is loyal to you for 10 years, and then he falls in love with some other woman. And, what are you going to do then? You cannot control future. Future predictability is an illusion that we give ourselves. There is no future predictability. Anything can happen at any time. So I told her the only thing that you can control is your own mindset. You can work on yourself, make yourself so strong and resilient that no matter what happens with your husband to be in the future, you're still going to be okay. It's not that you will not experience pain, but misery is a different thing. Misery is just a prolonged experience of pain that might have happened, 20 years ago. But we're still in misery because we just are attached to some kind of an expectation. The third one is fear of loss. Strong attachments can create a fear of losing what we value, leading to anxiety and insecurity. Just like what I shared with you earlier, that my business had become such a sense of security for me that the fear of losing it created a lot of anxiety. I see this, by the way, a lot in parents, especially Desi parents, when I work with them, because all of us, of course, as parents, we love our children. Probably the kind of love we have never experienced before is what we experience with our children. And the fear of them getting hurt uh, creates a lot of anxiety. And what I see in Desi parents is that because of that fear, they try to control their children a lot. Helicopter parents. One of the number one complaints I get from young people that I work with that are taking my courses and they're in their 20s and 30s, and even then they could be in their late 20s and 30s living in America, but their parents are too controlling, and there's constant struggle going on between the kids and the parents, and it's really because the parents don't know how to control their fear. This is where they have placed the love of their child above the love for God, above faith in God. They are not practicing tawakkul. So I teach the parents, sometimes I have to counsel both the parents and the children. And I have to teach the parents how to practice tawakkul, because I'm a mother too. I know how it feels. I've been through it myself. Being a mother of two daughters, single mom of two daughters, not easy. And they're very strong-minded women, as you can probably imagine. I raised them to be strong-minded, opinionated women, and they were not going to have any of it. I tried to be a helicopter parent. I couldn't help my, Eastern genes. That's who I was. That's what I saw growing up. So I thought I was being a very good, loving, cautious parent. And I realized what I was instilling in them by expressing my fear it's instilling fear and insecurity in them. So I was not only damaging myself, I was actually damaging the very children I love so much and want them to flourish and to succeed in life. And number two, I was trying to act as their Rabb. Rabb is God, and my Rabb is Allah and their Rabb is Allah. And Allah intimately and very lovingly is aware of my life and takes care of me. And similarly, he takes care of them as well and loves them more than I can love them myself. So again, it's when we start controlling, we feel insecurity. It is because of an attachment. It is not because of love. Love is liberating. It is freeing. Attachment is toxic, and it holds you back, and it enslaves you and it enslaves the other person that you think you love, but you're actually trying to control. Number four, identity and self-worth. Attachments can become intertwined with our identity. We might define ourselves through our relationships or possessions, making it hard to maintain a sense of self when those attachments are threatened. I see this a lot in so many different things. These days, because I've been raising my voice regarding rights of Muslim women and how the patriarchal conditioning is responsible for the hijacking of the rights of Muslim women. Islam, Quran, the life of Prophet ﷺ, when read and studied properly, shows you that Islam liberated women. Islam gave agency and autonomy to women, but it's the patriarchal mindset and the patriarchal interpretations done of the divine text that have led to control and oppression of women. And it is horrible. You look at what Islam did almost 1500 years ago, which was radical for those times. Nowhere in the world had women been given such recognition and equality to men. And then you look at Islam today and you see complete opposite. It's, women are not considered equal. Women are not given agency, and women are told to cover up, and, sometimes just one eye showing. And all of those things are a result of the patriarchal conditioning. And here's the interesting thing. When I raise my voice against this, the most resistance, the most fierce resistance that I face, and some of my other friends, female scholars who are talking about it, the most fierce resistance comes from women. Why? Because they are so attached to this identity that has been given to them by the patriarchal mindset, but it gives them this comfort of knowing that they are raised with this identity that no matter what you do, you're going to be inferior to men. However, if you, for example, take hijab or you cover yourself, your face, then you are going to be more pious in the eyes of Allah. And if you're more pious than other women, you are therefore superior to other women. So these women, because of the patriarchal conditioning, are raised with this sense that my biggest enemy is another woman because I am totally dependent on a man. Welcome to the Jamali Bridge, a podcast dedicated to exploring the timeless principles of truth, beauty, equality, compassion, and human rights within the Islamic tradition. Our conversations are crafted to bridge understanding, offering non-Muslims a clear lens through which to see the heart of Islam while helping Muslims reconnect with the core values of their own faith. Together, we'll journey into Islam's universal insights, revealing how they resonate with all seekers of truth and serve as a source of wisdom for navigating today's world. Join us on the Jamali Bridge, where meaningful dialogue builds understanding and fosters a shared appreciation of our collective humanity. My security and my well-being is dependent on a man, therefore, another woman is my biggest enemy. So it gives them a lot of comfort to know I'm superior to other women, right? So instead of actually, because a virtue, what is virtue? Virtue would define that you would have humility and not the sense of superiority and judgment for other women. So their attachment to whatever this identity is so strong that when it's threatened, they become very abusive, they become ferocious, they become hateful, they become judgmental, all because of the attachment. If you were actually attached to Allah, who liberates you and tells you that do not ever go into superiority, nobody's superior, unless you have taqwa and faith, and we'll get to that later. But you still don't get to judge other humans, Muslims or non-Muslims. But the attachment, because it always leads to misery, it turns a person into a toxic person. Again, I could go much deeper into this with identity and self-worth. A lot of times, people determine their self-worth from the validation they get from society, from the validation they're getting from another person. That's why a lot of people stay in abusive marriages, both men and women who are enduring abuse stay in that abusive situation because somewhere, somehow they are getting validation that, this is what you're a good husband, or you're a good son, you're a good father, or you're a good mother, good wife, whatever. And it's because of this toxic attachment. So moving on, number 5 is mindfulness and presence. So if you have these toxic attachments, what they do is you are no longer mindful, you're not even self-aware a lot of times, and you don't have presence in the present moment. So a lot of times you'll see that people will be so stuck on something that happened in their past. Like I said, it happened maybe 20 years ago, but they're still miserable about it. So they have this unhealthy attachment, or they have such a fear of the future, of losing something, that they are either living in the past or they're living in the future, and they're not in the present moment. And Quran says that the awliya Allah, the friends of Allah, do not experience sorrow, and they do not experience fear. So sorrow is over something that has happened, so living in the past, and fear is about something that is going to happen in the future, so living in the future. Again, detachment, healthy detachment encourages mindfulness, allowing us to appreciate the present moment without being overly fixated on outcomes or attachments. So let's quickly go over some of the problems that are associated with attachments. So number 1 is emotional distress. It creates emotional distress. Fear of losing attachments can lead to anxiety, sadness, or feelings of inadequacy. So again, this is all about your attachment to these false gods, right? Number 2, dependency. Over-reliance on people or things for happiness can stifle a person's growth and independence. that total freedom that I talked about. Number 3, resentment. Attachments can create resentment when expectations aren't met, leading to conflict in relationships. There was a video I did which went viral in Pakistan and got a lot of backlash because I said something that was radical for Pakistanis. And I said, your spouse is not responsible for your happiness. You are responsible for your happiness. So they were just, how can you say that? Of course it's her responsibility, or of course it's her responsibility. So what is that? That is attachment to an expectation. The truth of the matter is nobody's perfect. We are all going to make mistakes. We're fallible. We have a very unhealthy attachment, by the way, to our Muslim scholars. We have an expectation. They're perfect. They can do no wrong. Everything they say is right. And what does that do? It creates a lot of distress in us. If somebody does something, that is against what we believe, we go into such distress. And then another very toxic outcome is that we take the words of Muslim scholars as the last word. We don't bother reading the Quran ourselves. We don't bother trying to understand the Quran and trying to interpret the Quran ourselves. And we don't even realize that we are placing the word of a scholar, no matter how esteemed and knowledgeable they are, the word of a man above the word of God. We are actually out of alignment with our tawheed. How can anyone be a partner with God? Anyone. Quran is God's book. By definition, speech of God. So if God is infinite, if Allah is infinite, which we know Allah is infinite, if Allah is infinite, how can his speech be finite? How? It's not possible. It has to be infinite, which means that you will always find people who will come up with interpretation that you may not have thought about before. That is how it's meant to be. It is not a regular book which is finite and the message is encapsulated in the book, in the words, in the pages. Quran is divine speech. It has infinite meanings and infinite implications, and it is going to continue to grow and satisfy humanity till the end of times, because it is divine speech, right? So how can one person claim to have understood Quran in its entirety? Other than the Holy Prophet ﷺ, who is no longer amongst us, nobody could claim that. And even he could claim it because Allah taught him Quran directly through Angel Gabriel. So no one human being can claim to know and understand the Quran in its entirety. It's in my opinion, shirk. So, but we do it all the time. Number 4, stagnation. Being too attached to certain outcomes can hinder flexibility and adaptability, preventing us from embracing new opportunities, just like what I said about understanding Quran. Number 5 is overwhelm. Managing multiple attachments can become emotionally exhausting, leading to burnout. So think about the example I gave you. If you hook yourself up to 6 tow trucks, you're going to have, this overwhelm, burnout. You're going to feel stuck. You're going to have resentment. You're going to feel confused. What's going on? Why is God not helping me? Well, because, examine your own behavior. Next is neglect of self. Focusing too much on attachments can lead to neglecting personal needs, goals, and self-care. One of the biggest problems I find in people, especially from the Eastern culture, women from the Eastern culture, is not practicing good boundaries. So, this concept of self-sacrifice is glorified so much, especially for women, that they don't know how to practice boundaries. And all they know is how to sacrifice, kind of be a doormat, be agreeable all the time. And they completely neglect their own self. And so their attachment is to getting the validation from others, for which they are willing to sacrifice themselves. And again, attach yourself to God. The only attachment, in my opinion, that merits, not just that you may do that, but actually you should do it. And that's going to liberate you, is attachment to God, to Allah. Number 7, loss of perspective. Intense attachments can cloud judgment and make it difficult to see situations objectively. So many examples for this as well, where when you are so attached to a thing, an idea, an identity, or a person that it just totally clouds your judgment and you make very, very foolish decisions. I know of someone, I can give you an example. I know someone who is a woman I know, in her 50s or 60s, and has, feels so lonely. And she fell in love with someone who has so many red flags that, it is so obvious that what waits ahead of her is disaster. And she's not stupid, she's smart. But her attachment is so intense. She's calling it love, of course, but it's not. There's a lot of neglect and emotional abuse in the relationship already. So it's not love. It's just an intense attachment. And it's going to lead to disaster, but she's completely lost perspective. And that happens to a lot of us. Number 8, fear of change. Attachment can make individuals resistant to change, even when it might be necessary or beneficial. So this is a really good one because a lot of times, we all know that we need to grow. In order to be happy in life, we have to keep growing. One of the necessary elements of growth is change. And that creates so much fear because change means we have to go into the unknown. And the known situation might not be comfortable for us. That's why a lot of people stay in abusive situations or in bad jobs and careers. They hate it, but there's comfort because it's the known. They're comfortable with it. So in order to make a change, they have to take a leap of faith, which means uncertainty and change, and they don't want to do it. So a lot of times people just stay in very toxic, unhealthy situations because of their attachment to familiarity. So the conclusion is that recognizing and understanding attachments can be a crucial part of self-development. Striving for a balance, valuing connections while maintaining a sense of independence can lead to healthier relationships and a more fulfilling life. Developing mindfulness and self-awareness can help individuals navigate their attachments in a constructive way. If you like our content, please remember to subscribe and share this with whomever you think needs to hear this message.